Teşekkürler. So, hi Maria.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. So it's great to have you to talk about responsible AI today. So let's just jump into the questions, and I'd love to hear from you on responsible AI, ethical AI. So what is responsible AI to start with? Where are we coming from? Can you give us some information, background information?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think it's really important for us to start defining those terms more precise, because having the definition nailed and sorted from the beginning allow us to make decision and then have a proper action plan, and rather be confused of what's my understanding of responsible AI or ethical AI, and what's your definition. So the way we thought about responsible AI as a philosophy, as a way of doing, is to say that if AI ethics is concerned with describing a vision of a good life with AI, and it's concerned with how AI can help humans flourish, responsible AI is a more tactical set of disciplines that allows us to bring this vision to life, to have a set of rules, those ethical principles that allow us to have the AI products and services align with a set of values, but also in the same time being able to deploy a set of processes to govern this new technology that has distinct characteristic from previous technologies. It has self-agency, operates at scale 24/7. It's adaptable to external environment. Hence, we need to have a different way to govern it. And lastly, equally important is how do we preempting the risk that AI has bring. And the media was full with examples of misuse, underuse, or abuse of AI, with various applications displaying that their biases of lack of explainability, or even in some cases, an autonomous car, unfortunately, harm fatally a passenger. And as a result, understanding the risk upfront before you even start the design of applications, and being able to come up with mitigating activities is equally important. So it's not just about the design. Responsible AI looks at the outer layer of that kind of embrace the technology layer, the socio-technical and economical and moral layers that need to be accounted for, and how do we rethink how we build technology altogether. So that's responsible AI in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah, I've heard the term techno-social solutionism. So what would you say about it? Maybe you already hinted some of it, but it's about, too much technology and without enough consideration for human sciences aspects and social sciences aspects. Maybe the dangers of AI, as you just mentioned.
It is absolutely indeed the fact that we focus so much on a technology that's glitzy, right? So we are excited about the latest technology advancement. We suddenly see what DeepMind have done with AlphaFold and all the others that have made major breakthroughs with AI. And suddenly we forget that we don't develop technology for the sake of technology. We should develop technology aligned with human goals. And that's why positioning AI ethics as a discipline that looks at how to match the advancements of technology with the ultimate purpose of humanity, which is the flourishing of society as individual and now planet. I think it's so important. And in the past, we've been guilty of developing technology for the sake of it. And that's, as you say, techno-solutionism. Look, this is a shiny solution that flies. And let's just invent a problem or pick one of our problems and overfit it to that solution. That shouldn't happen anymore. And I think the exciting thing about what has happened with AI, and also with this a surge in cases of AI when it didn't go as well, is that we've realized we have to stop and reflect before we start having AI display or deployed in so many different parts of our society. That will be virtually very difficult for us to retrospectively address the issues we did not consider before. So I think there is an urgency, and more people understand it, that we have to build technology a bit better. We have to really understand the problem, and not just the problem, but the context where this problem manifests itself, right? So many cases where applications of AI, let's take the very famous Amazon recruitment tool that very quickly display bias against women. And I spoke with the engineers who build this tool, and they confessed that from a technical perspective, they did everything possible, all the technical fixes to find and address the bias in data and the algorithm. Yet at the end of the day, the tool still ended up being heavily biased against women. And the answer to that is that, of course, it was, because the vast majority of hires in Amazon, at least at the time, were 70% white men. So it was about the context where this process manifests, not the tool itself, but what the tool has done. And I think this is one of the exciting characteristics of AI. It's actually showcased like a window, reflected where organization needs to change, and actually gave a very, very good indication of the real state of things. And in order for us to move away from this techno-solutionism, one way is actually to look at those cases when AI didn't work as well and say, look, we've seen in that mirror, that context, and if we extrapolate to other contexts, we need to pay much more attention to what happens around that context where the problem manifests itself.
Right. And then I'll come to your work with maybe UK government on AI strategy. I believe as part of PricewaterhouseCoopers, and you're the team lead for AI for Good. So what can you tell us about, supporting the role that governments should assume for responsible AI?
I think that's an excellent question, especially asked in the context of the Turkish AI weeks where we are at the moment, is to say, how can the government support adoption or the development of AI in the national context? And we have seen in the last 4 years or so, close to 60 different nation states that had a national AI strategy. And while some of them have done a better job than others, I have been part of the efforts here in UK and seen various iterations the government has gone through in order to really tap into the potential this country particularly has, and this country potential. And obviously we are a bit blessed. I'm in Cambridge at the moment to have not only world-leading research when it comes to not just the technology of AI, but also its ethics. And we have a solid infrastructure and talent that's growing. But what was really interesting is to see how the government has understood what's UK's strength, right, to start with, and build on those strengths. So you have the universities, you have world-class research, but you might have a lack of skills, and the lack of skills is a problem that everyone has around the world. So how can we quickly deploy programs to empower young people to study the domains of data science and artificial intelligence, but also on the university routes, but also how do you create other opportunities for learning on the job, for example, so that you can start very quickly training the civil servants in a way that they will start recognizing the benefits and the risk of AI and will be able to work alongside. And also part of this recognition of the strength of the UK, and also it was really important to build a vision, knowing that there is in many aspects of interstate competition, there is a competition. Therefore, how can UK find a vision that can use this where its strength could be used to build this competitive advantage, and where could they position themselves? And due to the fact that we had this amazing research around ethics of AI, the decision was to say our vision is to build ethical and responsible AI, and it's not just about the developed technological developments of it, but also how can we do it in an ethical way? How can we make sure that the benefits are equally distributed? How can we make sure that we address the fairness problem, knowing that every society has its fairness issues? And lastly, I think what I've seen really exciting, and I think, you know, potentially it's something that you guys can get inspiration from, is the development on an AI ecosystem. So it's important to have an ecosystem that brings together the top talent, the entrepreneurs, the businesses that are looking to deploy AI, the civil society and activists, the research and think tanks, and also governmental departments. UK has created, as a result of this national strategy, a number of departments like the Office of AI, which is in task of owning this strategy and deploy it, but also a department called Center for Data Ethics and Innovation, which is in charge with understanding the key ethical concerns, go into depth and provide policy guidance for the government. And having this bubbly ecosystem of experts with complementary expertise allowed the government to tap into probably types of expertise that otherwise wouldn't have been considered, because we had this ecosystem, because we were empowered to bring ourselves and our expertise from the private, public sector, you know, and non-for-profit, with the view of providing a rounded view rounded perspective on AI.
Right. And actually, I'd like to share with the audience that in Turkey as well, our Turkish Management Sciences Institute, in collaboration with the Ministry of Industry and Technology, they worked on a national AI strategy. They're working on building a public AI ecosystem. So these are good steps for the future. And this has been the national AI strategy from 2021 to 2025, has been issued as a presidential circular back in August 2021. So it's new, but there's some movement, some good moves. I'm happy that we are aligned with the developments, global developments as is happening in UK. So from there on, I would like to maybe ask you about the principles of ethics and how can we apply principles of ethics to AI at the country level. You already mentioned about the strengths in UK, but can you just maybe elaborate more about, you know, how can we leverage our local culture, you know, to come up with the right ethical system?
Thank you for asking this question in this way. How can you leverage your culture in implementing ethics of AI? That's absolutely crucial, and please hold on to that. It's probably one of the most important elements when developing AI, because every single culture will have its own set of values, and ultimately those values needs to be reflected in the way we build and use technology. What has happened in the past is that knowingly and unknowingly, the West and especially US ended up exporting their technology solution that have been developed aligned with the American values, but those values are not the values of the rest of the world. So how can we understand what are the relevant ethical principles, and then how best we align it with the key Turkish values or the organization values for each of the enterprise looking to do that? And the way we've approached the implementation of ethical principles in PwC is to say, we have run an extensive research and identify all the ethical topics and documents that have discussed the principles in one way or another, relation not with just AI, but also computer science, robotics, data. And we stood on the shoulders of the giants, understanding that before us, there were a set of experts that seen computer science and an engineer paired with philosophers to identify the moral concern around a technology as unique as AI. And that's how the principles were born, saying, if we are to deploy a tool that has self-agency, what will be the key things that we need to keep in mind, and how to make sure that those concerns are being addressed. And when looking at ethical principles, since 2015 all the way now, we've seen about 250 now documents for different organizations that have drafted those principles. And some of them are more insightful than others. So take, for example, European Commission, Trustworthy AI, or OECD principles that have brought together a wide variety of stakeholders, and the principles are aimed to address, let's say, the needs of countries and large organizations. So probably first step is to say, let's pick up a set of principles and make sure that we translate those principles in the context of Turkey and then in the context of each organization. And secondly, after making this translation, it's really important to start looking, how do you build AI? How do you operate AI within the context of one organization, and start picking one of the principles, fairness, transparency, and going outside the technology build per se. We've heard in the previous talk, the principle of explainability and how it manifests from a technical perspective. But a lot of the issues with explainability and transparency actually have to do less with technology and more to do with how well do we communicate an explanation to different stakeholders? How well do we understand and manage complexity, right? And that will be the third element, is to pay attention to how do you build and operate AI, and pick the ethical principles and see how they manifest in different stages of your life cycle.
Right, great insight. Thank you, Maria. This just enables the adoption of responsible AI at the country level. We're running out of time, but maybe last few words on why it's important at the organizational level, and how would you link it to business ethics overall, the AI, responsible AI for organizations?
Well, like always, it's a very, very simple response. Why do we need to be moral beings? This is how society works. Right. This is how we achieve the best of everything. And it's the case with ethics, right? It's the case with AI ethics. So we want to have a moral behavior so that we take the best out of AI. We achieve that vision of helping more people flourish and address some of the evils we have. And while you're not going to be able to see a return on investment very fast, on long term, organizations who understand that the only way forward is building responsible and ethical AI will have a competitive advantage, will have better products and services, will have a better brand reputation, will be able to respond better to regulatory requirements, and overall, they will see their business flourish.
Right. Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to hear about responsible AI from an expert like yourself. So thank you for joining. And so we'll continue the program with Kerem's mediation. Thank you.